So I just want to give my thoughts on Soft White Underbelly and its creator, Mark Laita. Um, if you don't know, Soft White Underbelly is a channel on YouTube in which Mark interviews mostly people living on Skid Row in LA. And I'll just go ahead and say it. I think that Soft White Underbelly is the most important channel on YouTube. And, you know, when you think about interviewing drug addicts, prostitutes, gang members, homeless people, and what have you, you think that you know what you're going to be in for. You think, whoa, this is going to be depressing. But you don't really know until you actually hear these stories firsthand, the kind of unimaginable horrors that these people have lived through since children, most of them, and the stuff that they continue to live through, acting out that abuse on a daily basis. I mean, it's just absolutely traumatic. You know, a lot of times people in the comments just say they can't even finish watching it, or that they talk about how they just start crying when they watch these interviews. And so for that, I really do think that this channel is incredibly important to give these people a chance to tell their stories. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say about the channel itself. Now, as far as Mark, there's some controversy around him as far as, you know, people accusing him of being exploitative, of being, you know, lacking empathy or lacking understanding of what's going on with these people. I can get that a little bit. Some of the stuff he says is a little bit off, you know, a little too glib maybe, a little too willing to, I don't know, look at the bright side of things when there ain't really a bright side to it. And he can't come off as a little bit cold maybe, like lacking empathy. You know, someone will just tell him this like horrible story and then it's just like boom, next question, you know. Like he's conducting an interview, you know, he's not there to sympathize with you. So I can get that a little bit, but at the same time, you know, as I said, I think these interviews are incredibly important for the world. And as far as the exploitation accusations, you know, with him giving them money for the interviews, and yeah, sure, they probably are going to take the money and go out and buy drugs with it. But, you know, if you know anything about these drug addicts, even in their own words in these interviews, they're going to get the money anyway. They're going to get the drugs anyway. So maybe that's one day where they didn't have to prostitute themselves. Maybe that's one day where they didn't have to go commit a crime. So from that side, I don't have a huge problem with it. You know, is Mark himself just doing it purely, you know, out of the kindness of his heart? Well, no, he's getting something out of it. He's getting, you know, his name out there, and he's probably making some revenue off the channel. I don't have a big problem with that. You know, I think, again, it's just really important, the work that he's doing. And the fact of the matter is, he's a photographer. We don't know much about Mark except the fact that he is a photographer. So, you know, he doesn't have a degree in, you know, counseling or social work or psychotherapy. So, you know, are there people probably more qualified to interview these incredibly damaged people? Yeah, sure. Maybe they are more qualified. But at the same time, they're not there. They're not doing it. He's the one doing it. He's the one down there on Skid Row getting these people's stories. Not the social workers, not the psychotherapists, not the professionals. And yeah, they might have a little more ethical qualms about giving people drug money for for a YouTube channel. At the end of the day, you know, it's the proof is in the pudding, and he's giving these people a voice that they never had before. I can relate a little bit to the criticisms because, for me personally, I'm trying to build community gardens here in Durham, and you know, I get the side eye a lot. I'm not a master gardener. I'm not a botanist or a horticulturist. to be perfectly honest, as a teenager, young adult, I was kind of a little hoodlum, kind of a little jerk, And are there other people much more qualified to do it than me? Yeah, sure. Of course there are. There's lots of people more qualified. And yet, with all the gardeners you see out there, all the botanists, horticulturists, people doing community gardens, no one else thought to build community gardens in the projects? I mean, we're talking public land. This is paid for by our tax dollars, and you look like going to projects and they all look like shit. They don't have anything, no slice of beauty in the whole place. And it's so inexpensive to build a community garden, and yet no one's doing it. So I guess it falls to me to do it. Someone who's not an expert, but someone who had the idea and who's willing to put in the time and effort to carry it out. And so in that sense, I do relate to Mark, because yeah, he's not the most qualified. He has a little bit of a cold affect, I'd be interested to hear more about his life story. But at the end of the day, I do believe in what he's doing, and I think he's trying his best. You can't fix these people. People want him to do GoFundMes, and they want him to do this and that, but you cannot fix these people. Most of them were broken before they even ever hit puberty, and that's a fact. You can't go back and change all the horrible things that happened to them. And giving them money and giving them a GoFundMe, that's even worse. You're saying he's exploiting him on one hand, but then you're saying giving him a GoFundMe to give him enough to really overdose with. So, So I think he's doing his best. On some level, he doesn't really get it as far as some of the things, some of the situations, some of the societal pressures that have caused this situation. But he does get the most important thing. He gets that it's all about child abuse. And that's why the very first question he asks every interviewee is about their childhood. Because yeah, it all comes down to child abuse. Yeah, there are other societal factors. When you look at a place like Skid Row, someone's profiting off this suffering. Someone's profiting off all these people and their suffering. There are people living in fat mansions, and they're flying around in jets, and they're paying for the drugs to get in the country, and they're paying off the cops, and they're paying even the healthcare workers, and they're paying everybody so they can profit off these poor, miserable, abused children, which most of them are. And Mark understands that, and that's the most important thing. He's talking about the Great Plague of child abuse, which has turned this planet into hell. Because the child abuse is like a ball that rolls downhill and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, And there's no way to just assign blame to say, oh, this person's responsible, that person. Who knows where the abuse started? One person abuses one person, and that person abuses two persons, and then two people abuse four people, and it's just bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the world we live in. And no one wants to talk about it because it's so normalized that we don't even see it until it's these extreme cases where people are getting pimped out for $5 a crack by their own parents. And then we say, oh, well, that's abuse. Well, shit, that's just the most extreme form of abuse. There are many other forms of abuse that are just taken for granted in our society. And yeah, man, this is something that needs to be talked about. These people deserve to have their stories out there. So, Mark, keep doing what you're doing, man.